Welcome to Level Up Stronger, the podcast for anyone standing at the crossroads of change, seeking direction, inspiration, and a supportive community. If you're yearning for a shift in your life, whether it's personal, professional, or anywhere in between, this podcast is your beacon of guidance and encouragement.
On today's episode, we dive deep into the mind games we play with ourselves and explore ways to come out stronger. We're tackling a topic that's all too familiar, yet often overlooked: the negative self-talk, that internal critic that lives rent-free in your minds.
It's the toxic BFF that lives rent-free in your head, tackling the toxicity of negative self-talk. We'll delve into the silent saboteur of our self-esteem and happiness. You know, that voice inside your head that's quick to point out your flaws, to doubt your capabilities, or to catastrophize every scenario.
But here's the twist. Imagine if that voice, instead of being your harshest critic, could become a supportive friend. Intrigued? Well, that's what we're going to explore today. We'll understand what negative self-talk really is, how it affects us, and most importantly, how we can transform this inner dialogue into a positive, empowering one.
So whether you're struggling with the internal critic or you're just curious about the topic, this episode is for you. We'll also have some expert insights and real stories to guide us through this journey. We are your hosts, Tiffany Letterly
and Ken Lyon. Have you ever noticed that voice inside your head? The one that's quick to point out every mistake and doubt every decision? What if I told you that voice could be your biggest enemy in achieving your dreams? Welcome to Level Up Stronger, where today we're turning down the volume of our inner critic and turning up the power of positive self-talk. Buckle up as we embark on this journey to evict the toxic tenet of negative self-talk and redecorate that space with positivity and self-compassion. And remember, you're not alone in this. We're all in this together, leveling up stronger, one episode at a time.
So negative self-talk refers to that inner voice that criticizes, doubts, belittles, demeans, and often in ways that you would never speak to somebody else.
So true.
Right? So in the form of internal dialogue that can be pessimistic, judgmental, overly critical, focusing on perceived shortcomings and failures rather than strengths and successes. So that's the basic definition of negative self-talk. I equate this to that best friend who's living up here, who's a complete bitch and constantly talking to you in a way, you know, that friend from junior high who, you know, was on an ego trip, but she's stuck in here, right, inside your mind. And she's constantly telling you, or he is constantly telling you all the things that you're doing wrong.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, and a lot of times that comes in a lot of different, forms it'll take, like self-criticism, right? Judging yourself so harshly, disproportionately more than you would ever judge other people, or even other people would judge you for that matter. Oh, I'm not good enough. I always mess things up, which also, by the way, is something else, that over generalizing, right? That over exaggeration. I'm never good enough. I always mess things up. Well, that's bullshit. That's never true. It's not always and never. You will always find exceptions to those things. And that's one of the great ways to kind of catch yourself, is realizing, am I always messing up? Am I never good enough in every single situation in my life? No, that's not true. It's not.
Well, and that's building that grandiose, something so small becomes like an anticipated worst case scenario possible type situation, regardless of what the actual likelihood of something happened. Yeah. I unfortunately do this a lot, where I start thinking of, if I fail at this, everything in the world is going to fall apart. Everything, you know what I mean? Right. And then also we tend to then really overgeneralize a lot of what we're hearing as well, or what we're saying to ourselves. The negative conclusions are based on limited evidence. We don't have all of the story a lot of times.
So true.
The negative self-talk is building itself into a bigger story without having all of the actual information. I never do anything right, when it's in fact just a single tiny mistake. It's not ever. I don't ever do anything right. It's exactly, you didn't do this one thing correctly.
It's that saying you've always heard, making a mountain out of a molehill. That's exactly what this is talking about. Absolutely. It's taking one thing and then exaggerating it in your head to make a catastrophic event, when it's not. It's one thing that's been messed up, or one thing you screwed up on, which is part of being human, and making that somehow like this is going to affect your entire life, your entire well-being, that everything's going to fall apart if you don't do this. That's all what I consider the negative ego, which is why I say the negative self-talk comes from, or the dark side of yourself, the shadow side, whatever you want to think of it. I like the term negative ego, that part of you that likes to constantly criticize, constantly tear you down. And that part of ourselves, and we all have that, it's the part of you that its goal is to destroy your life, is to wreck everything. And if you give it the power to do that, it can. Destruction is easy. That's child's play. Anybody can destroy their entire life in the matter of a few minutes if you really want to, right? You could destroy all your relationships. You could get fired from your job. You could trash everything in a matter of minutes. It doesn't take that much.
So that's how easy it is to destroy, but to create takes effort.
It does. And consistency and commitment. Yeah, isn't it? Yeah, because that's the part where I think, to me, creativity is where you work with what I call the divine spirit, the bigger picture, as it were. You're working in conjunction with a greater power than yourself, and then that creates you help manifest your dreams that way. So yeah, another thing I think also that the negative self-talk a lot of times will do is you have the mind reading or fortune telling kind of thing, where you're saying, oh, that person thinks this and such about me, that I'm this horrible person. It's like, and like you just mentioned, Tiffany, you have no factual basis about that. You don't actually know what they think. You've not even talked with them. This is all projections in your own head about what you think they're thinking about you based upon something you just did or said. And there's nothing to back that up.
Well, a lot of times we impose like rigid expectations on ourselves, often leading to guilt, shame, frustration, right?
Yeah.
So for example, we use a lot of I should statements. I should be successful. I should feel a certain way about something. And we should all over ourselves. Right? In this negative self-talk that we're doing. And it's often a product, unfortunately, of past experience and expectations. We've been socially conditioned to think a certain way. I hate when we blame 100% of what's going on with what happened in our childhood, because I feel like we don't have control at that point of our current situation if we pay. But a lot of this negative self-talk is actually, and the toxic self-talk is actually formed in childhood. Someone put that voice in your head.
It's true.
And it may have been several someones who put these thoughts originally in your head, but you're letting them live rent free in there.
So true. And a lot of times those people are doing that, not necessarily out of malicious intent either, but because of their own unconsciousness or the way that they viewed the world, and they project it onto you as a child. And then, but you said, that's when you become an adult, or that's the difference, right? You have to start looking back at those things and challenging yourself and going, wait a minute, is that really true? Is that what I really think? And like the should statements, for instance, it's like, according to who, right? I should be successful at this. I should already have manifested $1 million by the time I'm 45. According to who? By whose standards? And is that something you agree to? Is that something you really want? Is that important to you? Is that what you really want to do? That I think that thing is really important to like recognize that. And also, like you said, recognizing that these source from places that are not within yourself a lot of times, but you take them on as your own.
Yeah.
Because you have not challenged those beliefs and those processes, I mean, that past conditioning, I think it's really important to recognize that that's part of what happens there.
Yeah.
And you have the power to break out of that at any time.
Well, and because that some of this is coming from past experiences or, family members or things from childhood, like it's hard sometimes to dig deep and accept that, maybe the people who were in your life as a child didn't have, like they were carrying around their own baggage.
Right, exactly.
And so like I feel some empathy for them, for the baggage that they carried around and how their life was going. I don't have to adopt that,
Correct.
But I do need to recognize when I'm allowing that to affect me.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
And the more you come to that realization, the better off I think you are mentally, because addressing negative self-talk is crucial to your mental well-being and personal growth, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's vital to catch yourself when you're doing that toxic self-talk and understanding where is that really coming from?
Yes.
Is there any validity to it, right? I mean, should statements, fortune telling or mind reading, overgeneralizing, self-criticism. Is there any thread of truth to what you're even thinking?
And usually there's not, Tiffany. That's the whole point. That's the way I call the negative ego, the way that works is that part of you will lie to you. It lies to you. And there is no factual basis at all for that.
Mhm.
It's just something that it makes up in your own head. Like, here's a great example, and I use this a lot of times in my practice as well. Say you're at a dinner table
Mhm.
and you're giving a party, you have a white tablecloth, you have red wine, all your friends are there, and then somebody reaches over to grab something and they knock over the glass of red wine. So the negative ego will say, oh, they did that on purpose just to mess up this whole thing. They want you to make it look bad and they want to spoil your dinner party because they really can't stand you. They hate what you're doing right now. All that chatter, all that stuff that comes from that, that's all made up. There's no factual basis whatsoever. That's the negative ego. The positive ego, a healthy ego, would say, oh, my friend just knocked over a glass of red wine. We should clean it up and get him a new glass of wine. That's
Yeah.
what's factually happening.
Well, and I have a confession that even before the dinner party even started, I would have played out the entire dinner party scenario in my head, probably in front of the mirror for 24 hours beforehand, because that's my toxic BFF is needs to play all the parts, which I feel like is like probably a trauma response, and I should unpack why I do that.
That's probably a
But
good idea.
I don't know if everybody else does that, or I thought everybody has this movie going on in their head that and they play all the parts. Apparently that's not something that everybody does,
Well,
but I do.
I don't do that.
Okay, good, good.
I
Because it's not a fun place to be because you're like
no.
obsessing well in advance over every part, every player at the dinner party is gonna say, and carrying out entire conversations, playing all the parts
Oh
before the
God.
dinner party even started. So to second guess whether or not that bottle of wine will ever be spilled.
My God, girl, that must be crazy making. That would drive me
There's a
nuts.
lot going on in here on a regular
I,
basis.
yeah, I would say so. I mean, you'd make a good lawyer because that's what they do. Negative what ifs, every negative possible scenario. We have to
I
figure out
would
what we're
drive
going to do in
myself.
case this happens,
Yeah,
right?
I would drive myself insane if I was a lawyer.
So I'm the opposite of that. I'm a very much go with the flow kind of guy, and that you adapt to the situation as it occurs around you. And I put the intention that it's all going to go wonderfully, that everyone's going to have a great time. It's all going to be fabulous. We're going to have a wonderful time, and just let everything just unfold in its own organic process.
Yeah.
That's the way I deal with that.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't.
that type
I
A
don't know.
personality. I'm controlling every part. Everybody's blocking, every storyline, every line that they say. Like I've played every part of that out before we ever got to the dinner party. I have had all the negative conversations that you can have with that person. Let's say, Uncle Joe is
Yeah,
gonna, start in on politics and he's gonna
right.
try to plug Trump, and I'm gonna say that like I've already gone through that entire thing before, and like the wine is inconsequential at that point because I've had that dinner party 6 times in my head already. I gotta stop that so I know and identify, and I hear or I've researched this, and basically it's a trauma response to
Right.
like
Definitely it
feeling not
is.
in control from childhood. But that's the negative toxic seventh grader in here is
Right.
trying to second guess all of the
All
things
things
that
that
could
could
go
possibly
wrong in the
happen.
moment, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot. I'm
Yeah,
not
that
gonna lie.
that's definitely that's definitely a
It's a lot.
lot. I mean, I like control, but I also realized this is in my 20s. I really kind of this realization that I was really big on controlling everything as well, as much as I possibly could. And then I realized I really couldn't control most things in my life. Didn't
Yeah,
have any control over them. And I realized I needed to let that go. And that fact was about, I mean, like sometimes control can be too good and sometimes it doesn't help. And the fact that the way that you can be in control is to choose not to be in control and to
correct.
allow things to manifest and flow in an organic, natural fashion. And I think it's important, by the way, just to a caveat we're on this, you still place an intention, right? You still put out what you want to have happen. You put that intention out into the universe. Like you're not giving the dinner party for it to be a disaster. Otherwise, you wouldn't throw it in the first place.
Correct.
You want it to be a positive experience for everybody. That's why you're having this to begin with. But at the same time, like what you said, I would think about personality types and where I would place my Uncle Bill, who I know is
Mhm.
going to be,
Yep.
charging people up. Well, I probably put Uncle Bill with the people who also like the same kind of thing he does, and they can have their own table off to the side and do their own bitching and moaning there, while the rest of us do our own thing, another part. So I would direct a little bit of it, I guess, is where I would think of it, as opposed to controlling necessarily, but directing.
Sure. Well, and I think that toxic voice is often then because now you are over analyzing everything, right,
Yeah.
in a situation,
Yes.
well, before, after, and during it's happening. that
Yes.
you aren't actually living in the moment, and you set yourself up for an abnormal layer of anxiety that's
Yes.
not really necessary, because
Or,
nothing ever turns out nearly as
uh,
catastrophic as
no.
you make it out to be.
It doesn't. And that's a great point. I was just going to bring up is that, Tiffany, when you're doing that, you're not allowing yourself to be in the moment. You're not allowing yourself to be in the now and experience where you are right in that moment. And
Right.
that's so key. I have an acting background. And one of the things that we learned in acting was that it really looked very fake and it was not very effective. If you were sitting there thinking about the next time you get to speak, the next time your line comes up, and you're not even listening to what your scene partner is saying, then you're not present. You're not in the spot. You
Yeah.
can't have honest responses because you're not even in the moment. You're already thinking about the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. You're not in that space where you are right at that moment, and it becomes false. It becomes very fake, like it's phoned in, like there's something insincere and inauthentic about that.
And I think we often do that with past experiences too, right? It's not just
Hmm.
future things that
Hmm.
are going on, but I think our toxic self-talk reorganizes past events to meet or fit within the mold of our worldview,
True.
and affects our way that we live today based on our perception of the things that happened previously.
It's true, and that's a trick that the mind plays, and the ego plays with you as well. Is that if you'll notice that the past is very mutable, we think of it as being fixed, but
Mhm.
it really isn't because different people remember the past in different ways. Like your siblings, for example, you may remember a certain incident that happened, and you may remember it one way, and your sibling may remember it the completely opposite way. I mean,
Yeah.
like I have a friend of mine who's got five brothers and sisters, right?
Yep.
And she remembers her childhood being overall very, very supportive and fun and enjoyable and had a really good time. Her sister remembers everything being horrible, toxic, constantly criticized, never any fun, always having this horrible experiences around her. They lived in the same house. They
Yeah.
had the same parents. They were going through the
Yep.
same experiences, but that filter, that perception about how you look at the world and
Yeah.
how you decide to support your belief systems, and then you make the past conform to those belief
Yep.
systems by reinterpreting that. And of course, there's no one that can challenge that because it's your own memories, right? It's your own
Well,
how you want to enforce those beliefs.
and I think sometimes the toxic self-talk and thought processes are actually protective mechanisms,
At times they can be.
where,
Yes.
yeah, where negative self-talk develops as a protective mechanism, especially from childhood memories, uh,
Yeah.
to protect you from the realities of the things you saw, did, heard, right? And
Yeah.
so that's often times where, people will start talking about or thinking that they're never good enough
Yeah.
or never good at doing something, where
Yeah.
something happens that really had an effect on your psyche as a kid.
Yeah.
And now you have to find a way to manage the expectations and avoid disappointment in the now based on the things that, like, how you perceived a past experience.
Yeah, because
Sense?
yeah, it does. Because you take them as making it somehow that you personally are responsible for these things that were occurring, which you weren't. Usually
Yeah.
it's your parents or the adults in the situation. But then based upon that, you can start giving this place of feeling like having a real low self-esteem,
Mhm.
feeling really anxious or stressed, feeling depressed, feeling like
Yeah.
you don't make good decisions, that you don't want to be around people socially because you think that you're scared of saying the wrong thing all the time, all
Mhm.
these different ways that it can express itself, based upon that. And you're absolutely right. I think that's part of something that's really important to recognize. It's like, wait a minute, where is this really coming from? And is
Yeah.
that really what's happening now in my life? Is that really what's going on?
I think that's where you have to tune into the consciousness of thought. Like,
Yes.
so often we just walk through the day and we have a million thoughts that run through our minds and we make a million decisions, right? And we're
Yep.
not really conscious of, like, what we're thinking. Like, we're
So
not
true.
conscious of the fact we're breathing, yet
Right.
our brain is telling our body to breathe, right? And
Right.
so we often are also not conscious of any of the fluid flow of thoughts that go on. I mean, I'll catch myself sometimes, like, on a thought and I'm like, how did I get here? Like, where did that, like, and I'll trace myself back to figure out, like, where, like, I'm off in left field out here. How
Right.
did I,
How
because
did I get to
a
this
minute
place?
ago I was thinking about this. What was the path that got me here? And you're
Right.
completely unconsciously, like, floating through thought. And I think, especially when it's negative thought, you have
Yeah.
to actually tune in to the consciousness of understanding why and where it's coming from and actually pay attention to it.
Yeah. And I think that's, yeah, I think that definitely is a way to empower yourself around that. But I think the point like you're making is that you have to become aware of what you're doing first before you can change it. When you recognize you're starting to have these negative thoughts, like you said, how did that extrapolate? How did I go from point A to point B? What was my thought process? And then catch yourself doing that and then stopping yourself continuing to do that. Like for me, a lot of times I work with my, clients that I talk about how you have to be conscious first about what you're saying. Like for instance, like not tearing yourself down. Oh, I'm a piece of shit. Oh, I'm a horrible person. I'm like, well, no, you're not. Like for one thing, for instance, it's important, I think, to identify and separate the behavior from the person. This is a really powerful technique.
Correct.
Like for instance, if someone is being an asshole, you don't tell them, "Oh, you're an asshole." You're saying you're acting like an asshole right now. You're behaving really rude and disrespectful to me. You're not saying that they're that person because that's saying that their entire being, their whole essence is an asshole, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
and that's not the case. So you separate behavior from the person. That's a really helpful tool to start to stop that toxic negative self-talk that's going on inside your head. And that's toward yourself as well, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm such a jerk. It's like, no, I'm acting like a jerk right now. Okay, yes, I am. So that I can change because I can change my behavior. I can
Yeah.
shift what I'm doing. But if you tell yourself that you're just a jerk, that puts you in a place of being a victim, of being powerless, that you have nothing that you can do, that you're completely at the whim of whatever is happening around you. And that's all lies. That's all bullshit.
Yeah. I had a situation this week at work where I have a team of three who don't get along. And I realized that they all have some toxic baggage that they're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And instead of communicating effectively and understanding each other and changing that and understanding that you're in control of your thoughts, you're in control of your feelings, and you're in control of your actions,
Are.
they are all playing the victim in this role,
Yep.
and their negative self-talk and perception of the situation has now built the entire situation into this much more like toxic environment. And they're all three feeding into this frustrating,
Yeah.
cataclysmic event where
Yeah.
now, they all want to quit or, give up or whatever, right? And
Right.
so and I had to sit them all down this week and have the conversation about like, you can't control each other, but you can control the energy you're bringing into the room. You can
Absolutely.
control the thoughts that you're bringing to the table. You can
Absolutely.
control your actions and you can control your feelings,
Yeah.
right? And if you don't effectively communicate how you're feeling and you're just listening to the toxic thought process in your head about your perception of what's going on, you're doomed. Like the
Yeah.
whole team is doomed to complete
Yeah.
failure because you're never going to get over this, like
Yeah.
past
You're
this
right.
issue, because you're not even willing to come to the table with an open mind about any of it.
Exactly. And to even take a look at yourself and how you are contributing to what is going on. That's like I say, you can't control other people, but you can control your responses to other people.
Yeah.
That's where you have the power, right? That's where
Yeah.
you can yeah, 100% control over that. There was another technique that I learned from neuro-linguistic programming. It's a study of the thought and the mind and how it works and affects your entire being. Anyway, but one thing that's really helpful with that aspect is to look at the positive energy, the positive reframing the positive experiences beneath what's going on. Like, for instance, you're three people that don't get along.
Yeah.
One technique would be to ask each one of them individually. It's like, so what is it you want? What are you going for here? What do you really
Yeah.
want? And when they identify, like, I want to have Joe stop, criticize me. Okay, so if Joe stops criticizing you, what does that give you? How does that, what happens next? Oh, well, I'll feel better about myself. Okay, so if you feel better about yourself, then what happens? Well, then I'd be more productive. Okay, great. So if you're more productive, then what happens? Well, I'd be feeling good about my contributions. Great. If you feel good about your contributions, then what happens?
Yeah.
Well, I would feel like a valuable part of the team and that I'd be able to help manifest the goals that we're looking for. Awesome. So you do that with each one
Yeah.
of them people going up to a higher level of positive energy. What does that give you? What does that give you when that need is met? What does that give you when that need is met? At a certain point, all three people will come to the conclusion they're all going after the same thing
Yeah.
from different angles, but they're
Yeah.
all going after the same thing, and they'll recognize, oh, so we all want the same thing. We're just going about it
Mhm.
in a different way. so we can try and think about this in a different manner than we have in the past. That's a really
Gotcha.
powerful way to work with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Going deep in layers.
Going deep layers and with a positive.
Yeah.
What does that give you? How does that make you feel?
Yeah.
What does that give you? What is the positive response to that, having that need
Yeah.
met? Then what happens? Then what
Well,
happens?
and these three employees, I think they do spend an inordinate amount of time in negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Like I just felt like
Yeah.
after having the conversation about, and they're, this is manifesting then in blaming each other or
Yeah.
perceiving that there is a hidden agenda or someone hates me or,
Right.
oh, this other person is so toxic and this and that, whatever else. Individually, if I pull the pieces apart, they're perfectly decent people, right? Like,
Right.
there's no issue, but like they have built this negative storyline
Yes.
individually and then some in shared because of
Right.
with the three of them, but
Right.
and it's affecting their ability to just like work and be happy,
Exactly.
which is
Exactly
crazy to
right.
me.
And something I think one of the ways to help with that as well, I find, is to, have, and you've probably seen this before,
Yeah,
consciously have them focus on the strengths or achievements of each of the other people in the group, right? It's
yeah,
like, say something positive about Joe. Yeah, he gets on your nerves, he pisses you off, and you don't like to be around him, but what do you think is a positive trait,
yeah,
Just to have that shift of focus where they realize, oh, he's not this generalized horrible person all the time, and which is why I can't stand him, kind of thing. But
yeah,
what does he have what's a positive trait about him? Just to start to make that shift, right? That reframe about what's going on there. So if they start to see each other as human beings who all have our strengths and our weaknesses, that's part of the human
yeah,
experience, and how you can look for the silver lining amidst that stuff that's happening, right? Like
yeah,
what's going on beneath the experience there. Like I think about that, like, for example, like the power of how your perceptions, how change your reality. Like Nelson Mandela, for instance, right?
mhm,
Most people who would get arrested and thrown in jail for 20 years or however long he was in jail for, they would be crushed by something like that, right? They
yeah,
would be completely they would be the end of their life. They'd be done. But what does he do? Instead, he's writing books while he's in prison. He's focusing on his mind and focusing on the positive intention, the positive outcome of what he wants to have happen. And he ends up coming out of prison and becoming the leader and creates this powerful, positive social change for the entire country. And that's his own internal workings that did that. That was the same external circumstance
yeah.
of being arrested and thrown in jail, but his internal resources is what allowed him to transform that into something that became extremely positive and
Well,
powerful.
and he made the choice to use the time that he had there,
He did.
right? It was he had a choice on how he felt about the situation. He had a
Yep.
choice on what he thought about the situation, and he had a
Yep.
choice on what he did about the situation.
That's exactly
And
right.
we all have that choice.
We all have that power. We all have that choice.
Correct. A lot of times it's important to note that early influences, which can be significant, right? So
Good.
Nelson Mandela, his early circumstances of being thrown in jail, he's not necessarily the sole contributor to the
Correct.
negative self-talk because there were legitimately bad things that happened to him
Right.
while he's in prison, he's in jail.
Absolutely.
Like those
Absolutely.
are like real tangible things. So I'm not completely like trying to disassociate people from the situation they're in.
Correct.
Because a lot of times we start talking about like how, well, you don't understand because you've never lived it, or you've never lost someone, or you've never been in jail, you've never been to the military, you've never, right? We start talking
Right.
about like you wouldn't understand how I feel. But so individual experiences are a part of the equation. Personality, your life events, other factors play a major role in some of the things that you think
Do.
your experiences. I'm not going to
Do.
discount people's experiences, but understanding the origin of negative self-talk can be a crucial step in addressing and transforming it. So,
Yes.
because everybody's given a set of circumstances that they live through,
Correct.
where the kind of the rubber meets the road is then how you think, feel, and act about them. And it's
Exactly.
100% personal choice. And so identifying the source of the negative self-talk when you choose to go down the road of negativity instead of positivity, because it's a choice.
It is a choice.
I chose to go down a negative thought process or
Yep.
or feel negative feelings about something or take a negative direction. So it's
Yep.
understanding that can be learned behavior. It is sometimes like things that you just settle into that natural pattern.
Yeah, it's unconscious.
But since it's a learned behavior, it can be unlearned, right?
Correct.
And replaced with positive, constructive self-talk.
And you can learn a new behavior that is
Correct.
positive and constructive. That's exactly right. Now, one of the things I've found is that when people go into this negative self-talk, self-toxic place, right, of this negative self-talk in your head, that it becomes like a downward spiral, like you're going down the rabbit hole. And if you let yourself, if you let your mind just keep running and running and running, it will just get worse and worse because it's this downward funnel. So one of the keys I have found that's been very effective is what I call breaking the state. And what you do is you do not allow yourself to continue down that path. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, when you said you have a lot of, you're getting this like negative place in yourself, you're like, oh my God, all this stuff. Instead of letting it just keep going out of control, you break that pattern by inserting a new thought. And one of the things I found that's most effective is thinking an absurd thought, something totally
Yeah.
crazy, like a giant ice cream cone falling on the Empire State Building, or a unicorn pooping rainbow sherbet. And as soon as you think that, like you're doing right now, Tiffany, your brain goes, "What? What?" There's this little short circuit, like
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense. And in that pause, in that moment right there, then you can insert the positive thought. I'm doing really great at everything that I'm doing. Everything's getting better and better. I make positive choices in my life. I love who I am, even with my faults and failures. You insert a positive thought in that space because I guarantee you, when you think that absurd thought, there will be a pause. There'll be a short circuit in your head.
Yeah.
Your brain will go, "What the hell are you talking about?" And then in that moment, that's your time. That's your wedge
Yes.
right there. And you can redirect your thoughts in that moment. And you might not stay there that way. You might go back again to the negative thought, but just keep doing it. You'll get better and better at it. And as you keep doing it, your subconscious mind will start to assist you because it'll realize, oh, he doesn't want you to keep doing these negative thoughts. She doesn't want me to keep thinking these horrible things about herself any longer. So I need to start thinking different thoughts instead, right? So it'll start to assist you in that process as you keep working on it. So it's a way of retraining your brain, right?
Yeah.
And reprogramming your
Absolutely.
mind.
Well, I think it's important to understand that negative self-talk can have a profound impact on your psychological and emotional well-being.
Definitely.
Often it stems from low self-esteem. So
Yep.
being overly critical and demanding of yourself, which
Yes.
erodes your self-confidence and self-worth.
Yes.
And
Yes,
again,
it
that
does.
often harkens back to, maybe somebody told you weren't good enough as a kid or led
True.
you to believe that you were not good enough.
Yes.
So your, self-esteem starts to be eroded. And
Yeah.
your low self-esteem can occur when you're in the seventh grade, or it can occur when you're 45. Like
Correct.
there's no age limit on low self-esteem, and it comes and goes. So some
It does.
circumstances you might have decent self-esteem, but over time, continued negative self-talk leads to chronically low self-esteem, in which,
Right.
because it's the learned pattern effect,
Right.
right?
And you're eroding your self-confidence and your
Correct.
self-worth and your self-value when you do that to yourself.
And it also causes a lot of anxiety and stress, right? So
Yes.
worry, and that's where when I'm on that spiral, next thing you know, I am stressing myself out and
Yeah.
I'm creating an anxiety state that is then helping to further erode the confidence. And the negative self-talk creates that cycle. And
Yeah.
then you are constantly anticipating the failure and the criticisms before they happen. And that's where I default to, unfortunately,
So
a lot of the time.
here's something for you to contemplate.
Yeah,
Worry is projecting energy toward a future you do not want.
100%.
And it's a complete waste of time and
You are
energy.
correct.
There's nothing
Completely
factual.
correct.
There's nothing there, right? At all.
Correct.
So worry to me is something you throw out. It's like that is just complete waste of time.
It
So
is.
instead, focus on what you want to have happen instead. And even though it doesn't come out to be exactly the way you think of it, just imagine the scenario that you want to visualize, right? What you want to manifest. What do you want to see happen? How you want to see it come forth? What do
Yeah.
you want to have happen instead? Because that otherwise it's just a waste, right? And nothing
Yeah.
happens. It's spiral. It helps going that spiral place. And if
When,
you keep doing that, you become depressed, right? Because you're
oh,
thinking,
for
oh
sure.
my
Yeah.
God, you're always sad. You're feeling really hopeless. You feel like there's just nothing going on. Nothing's going to work for you. It just exacerbates all those depressing feelings that, we all get depressed sometimes. That's normal. In fact,
Mhm.
quick and sudden change in our life, there's a natural point of feeling depressed, right? Because there's a sense of loss. Even when something positive, like for instance, you're change jobs, for instance, or something, or you're moving, and there's a party that like feels depressed and you're thinking, well, that's weird because I'm happy because I like the new job and I like the new place even better than the place before. But there's a sense of loss because that old self, the old way of being, is dying. And
Yeah.
so there's a sense of loss there. And there's a natural response of being depressed around that for a short period of time. And then you kind of like release, process, and release that. And then you move on.
Yeah. And I think often when you're stuck in that downward spiral that the toxic self-talk takes you in, it impairs your ability to actually make decisions because
Yes.
you're so worried about what the outcome is that you
Yes.
then don't make any decisions. And then
Correct.
you really struggle because you're often fearing the worst or doubting your competence in doing
Yeah.
whatever it is that you're
Or your
worried about,
ability to change
right?
it, right?
Yeah.
That indecision that happens with that when you're
Yeah.
getting in, you know, get that sense of not wanting to make any changes at all because you're scared you make the wrong decision. You know, I found that that's really one of the worst things that can happen as far as, you know, your life goes.
Yep.
So I found that the worst possible thing was to do nothing. Even make a choice that you think is going to end up, it might be worse than what you're doing right now. Any choice is going to shift the dynamic of that experience.
Well, I think that's the linchpin is that we don't, and this is my frustration with staff, right? They
Okay.
get to a roadblock or hurdle,
Yeah.
right? Or a decision making crossroads, right?
Yep.
And they get so caught up in their own head and their thought process that they
Yeah.
fail to make that decision and just sit down and give up.
Right.
And you're
Right.
right, that's 100% the worst thing that you can do
Yes.
because you always have an option. There's
Always.
always something you can try.
Yeah.
It may not advance you further.
Right.
It may send you a couple step back, but
Yeah.
at least you're moving in a
Exactly.
direction.
Exactly. And then you can adapt based
Yeah.
upon the results that happen based upon your decision, right? If it makes you go 2 steps back, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm going to choose something different because that didn't work. So I'm going to try something else now. But you wouldn't have even known that if you didn't make any decision at all. If you
Uh,
just sit there
And
completely with nothing,
it's not okay to give up.
it's not okay to give
It's
up.
not okay to give up. And unfortunately, the people who give up, they settle into depression, there's social withdrawal and loneliness, right? They
Yeah.
end up having relationship challenges.
Yes.
You just you gave up. You gave into the sadness, you gave into the hopelessness, you gave into
Yeah.
the negative self-talk, the feeling unworthiness, right? And
Right.
it results in then how it affects, your interaction with others.
Yeah, it reduces the quality of your life overall and it completely makes you much more vulnerable to mental or emotional illnesses or disorders because of
Yep.
that. And also physical health issues will come up because of that as well, because you're limiting your own personal growth, your own way of being able to manifest your dreams and your goals. You know, you just become you place yourself in a victim mentality and then you really are subject to whatever is happening around you and you're not allowing yourself to have any say in your reality and what's happening, what your experience is.
Affects your quality of life. So
It
then,
does.
next thing
Absolutely.
you know, this negative self-talk becomes a significant part and positive change, like is going to take some effort.
Yeah, it does. And that's okay. It's okay to take some effort,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
People, you've always heard that saying about, the narrow path and the wide path in the
Mhm.
forest, right? And like
Yeah,
most people take the wide path because it's easy, but the narrow path is where the most of the goodies lie because it's a little more challenging, right? You have to
yeah,
actually do a few things to accomplish that and get through that. But that's okay, right? It doesn't
yeah.
have to be I'm not saying that all growth is necessarily has to be a challenge per se, but it can, but that it's not, it's just that it's okay to make that effort. It's okay to make that change. It's okay to take extra effort to create things that you want to have happen in your life.
Well, and I think also that negative self-talk then limits you from doing the things that you really love. So here's an example. Like I have always been very artistic.
Yeah,
um from an early age, love to, like, you put a crayon in my hand and that was like I was as happy
nice.
pig in mud, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that was my
nice.
thing, that was my jam. I was winning awards in elementary school for art.
Cool.
I won, number one ratings in high school in competition.
Nice.
Like I was really good at art. I allowed, this again goes back to childhood,
Yep.
the negative perception of being an artist,
Yeah.
society and family members and whatnot would say things like, oh, the starving artist, like you're never going to make
Right.
money as an
Right.
artist. This not. And I
Right.
started to believe that doing anything in art was not going to be the correct career path for me because I wouldn't be able to support myself and whatever, and so I started to
Right.
believe again the baggage from others, right?
Yep.
And I
Yep.
let myself not pursue a path. And there's been, anybody who is artistic in any way, shape, and form, whether you're a musician, an artist, you're an actor,
Actor,
any
performer.
any of those like creative arts things, you're
Yep.
putting a lot of your personal self
Yep.
into the things that you're creating.
It's
And you
true.
have to be very vulnerable to do that.
It's true.
Right. And so, unfortunately, then we start listening to critics outside and we start adopting those criticisms internally. And that
Yes.
negative BFF that's living in your head is now
Yes.
telling you that you're not good enough
Right.
to
It's
do,
interpreting
yeah.
that data.
And
Yes,
so
exactly right.
you do a disservice to yourself because I now in my early 40s look back and think, I might have actually been excessively happy,
Yeah.
happier than I am.
Yeah.
Had I actually been spending the last 20 years like developing my art and creative potential,
Yes,
right? I
absolutely.
may have been sad too, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, but I missed out on that because I let the negative self-talk and criticisms that were living rent-free in my head keep
Yeah.
me from doing something I legitimately love.
Yes, exactly right. And I think that's a super key point right there is doing something that you really love,
Yeah.
that nurtures your spirit. And like I
Yeah.
said, how will you ever know if you're going to be successful at that if you don't give it a shot, if you don't go for it,
Correct.
right? Because otherwise you'll never have the experience. You'll never know. You
And
never will.
even if I wasn't going to be successful and sell $1 million paintings,
Yeah.
I still would have enjoyed my time doing it.
Yeah. I had that experience as an actor and a performer in the Bay Area, in San
Yeah.
Francisco in the Bay Area. I moved out there to go to school and I for theater, and I loved it. And so I started doing it. And even though I never got a big break per se,
Yeah.
I did a ton of work. I worked with a bunch of different people. I had a wonderful time.
Yeah.
It was such a great experience. I grew so much as a person in
Hmm.
the whole process. And I ended up, supporting myself for about 20 years doing that. I never was like a multimillionaire doing it. I didn't get that kind of level, but I was happy with what I was doing, and
And you wouldn't
it rewarded
trade
my life.
that experience for
I
anything,
wouldn't. No,
right?
it was
You're going
wonderful.
back,
No, wonderful.
right?
I'm so glad that
So,
I did that. And I think I really encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast also that if you're on this crossroads about thinking about, doing what other people are telling you to do to conform to what you're supposed to be doing, quote unquote,
yeah.
and giving up on your dreams, don't listen to those voices.
Yeah.
Follow your dreams, take the risk, follow your passion. If it doesn't work out, you can always pivot and do something else later. But right now, go for that because when
Yeah.
you do that, when you pursue something that you have a passion for, that rings speaks to your heart and makes you feel like an expanded version of yourself, that spirit calling you to do that.
Correct.
You're here on the earth to produce that, to contribute in that way. Go for it. You do a disservice to everybody if you deny that.
So, what are
Yeah.
some effective strategies to help listeners transform the negative inner dialogue?
Okay. So one of the first things I mentioned was about the breaking of the state. That's really important. You do not let yourself just continue down the cycle, right? You have to stop the negative thought train from happening. And then I also think it's really important to work on, people they have different names for it, but affirmations for the lack of a better word, but you speak positive statements to yourself about what it is you want to create, what you want to manifest. Some people call those different power statements or different things now. It depends on how you want to view it. Excuse me, but that's the idea is that you focus again on what you want to have happen instead. But it's also there's a reframing process that occurs. So for instance, someone is treating you disrespectfully and they tell you that you're this horrible person. And your thought process is, oh, I'm a horrible person because they told me that. It's like, well, no, wait a minute. You have to challenge those things. Wait, I'm not really a horrible person. I'm really actually a really good person, but this person is treating me in a horrible way. And so then I'm responding back in another horrible way because my intention behind my actions is to hurt
Yeah.
them back. So I think that's one of the key things that I find I work with my clients is that what is your intention behind your actions, behind your communication? Why are you doing that thing? What is it? What is your goal for that? And what does that do? It perpetuates the same negative, toxic behavior, and it goes back and forth between the two of you, and it just downward spirals. And it does nothing to change the situation. And like you said, one of the keys I teach my clients about is that You have a choice. You can choose how to interpret that. And also you can choose whether you allow them to push your buttons or not. And I know that sounds easier said than done, right? But it's true. If you choose not to respond or you choose to respond in a different way, there's a huge shift. Like, it's exactly,
I like to go through the process of what do I know for sure? Like what,
yes,
like the realities of a situation.
yes.
Then what can I do to help the situation? And then what does like a really good example of this situation look like?
Oh, I like that, Tiffany. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, I do the fact checking thing a lot as well.
Yeah.
Like when you start that stuff starts to happen inside your head, you're like, what do I really know about what's happening here? Do I really know, for instance, that they think I'm a bad person or they think I'm this horrible, experience is that I'm the person that's sourcing all that? Do I know that they think that about me? No, you don't probably. And most likely you haven't even talked with them directly about that, right? You haven't even asked the question to them directly. Like that's a great way to diffuse, for instance, rumors, right? It can be a toxic behavior like that. The rumor mongering, the lies, the self-deception that can happen there, and find out what's really happening. Go to the source.
What do you do when somebody won't tell you who the source is?
Uh, in that case, I realize that their intention is really just to cause a hurt or disruption in the relationship, that
Yeah.
there's no really desire to create
Yeah.
honest communication. And
Yeah.
so then I extract myself from that person. I stop interacting with them because
Mhm.
there's not authentic communication that's coming from them. There's not an authentic interaction with them.
Yeah.
Because if they
That's
don't
fine.
tell, if they won't identify the source, if they won't reveal that,
Yep.
then they don't really want the situation to change.
No.
It's
And
just like when
that's
someone pulls
my
the old,
biggest
oh, if
pet
you don't
peeve.
know, I'm not going to tell you. Well,
Yeah.
that's bullshit because that's
Yeah.
a way of passively aggressively manipulating you to try and keep you in the same dynamic, the same relationship that's happening.
Correct.
That's dysfunctional. That's
Yeah.
toxic. That's
Yeah.
hurtful. And they don't want it to change, which means their negative ego is some kind of getting some kind of hit or charge because they're in control. They have a dominant energy over you, They're the
Yep.
ones that can make you do what they want. There's something else going on. There's a hidden agenda. Otherwise, they'd be upfront with you.
Yeah.
They'd be honest. Does that make
I
sense?
100% agree with you. Yeah. I have somebody in my sphere of influence who does that a lot. They pass on negative information and they're like, well, I can't tell you who said it, blah, blah, blah. Okay. That's not a me problem.
Yeah,
That's a you
and
problem.
stop talking to me about it then because
Exactly.
I don't
What
need
do
to
you want
hear
me to
it.
do? How do
Right.
you want me to fix it? How do you want me to make it better?
Right. You can't verify that it's true. You don't know it's hurtful behavior
Correct.
at the very least, and there's so why are you want to share this with me? Why are you even telling me this?
Correct.
What's the point? The intention behind the actions again. What
Hmm.
result are they expecting to get from that, right?
Hmm. They're looking for a hit to their own ego. They're looking for that
Absolutely. It usually like
little
power,
boost to their own
domination,
ego, a power
control.
shift,
That's,
control.
that's
Oh yeah,
exactly what
for
it usually
sure.
is. And I get that normally stems from low self-esteem and low self-worth on their part because they're trying to
Correct.
pull other people down to make them feel
Yeah.
better about
Yeah.
themselves. But that doesn't justify or condone the behavior.
No, not at all. And
It's
unfortunately, and this is one of the things that came up this week when I was having the conversation with my team. Part of one of the problems that they're having is they have an external client who's super toxic, like
okay.
aggressively toxic, and that is also causing them some strife. And I just asked them to look at the situation with some empathy because
Yeah,
you don't know what is going on in someone else's life.
you
If this
don't.
person who's like acting out and is super like aggressive and toxic, one, as your leader or supervisor or whatever, I'm not going to allow you guys to be abused. So you need to come
Yes.
tell me and
Yes.
I'll deal with it in whatever way I can. But like I have some empathy. I have to go to a place of empathy. Otherwise I will lash out back,
Absolutely.
and which isn't helping the situation. You don't
Nope.
know what is going on in someone else's life,
You don't. You don't know
right?
what they're
That
dealing
that
with, what
person could have
challenges.
cancer, that person could be abused at home. There's like any
Like
number of things that
a
could
loved one could have
be
just had died and they didn't want to
exactly,
share
or
it. I
that
mean,
that person could be in their own internal toxic spin down, right? So
yes,
I
yes,
and I have to feel if I feel a little bit of empathy and I feel sorry for whatever might be going on in that person's life, that they're then choosing to take it out on everybody around them.
correct.
I approach the situation differently.
It's true.
And
Absolutely.
I cut the power cord
Yes,
to
exactly
feed
right.
that negative energy because my
Right.
now I'm not giving negative energy to the negative situation. I'm coming at it from a place of love and empathy,
Yeah.
and that stops it in its
It it
tracks.
it totally does. It totally disrupts that entire energy. It stops
Yeah.
it dead in its tracks. It's exactly right. Like for instance, if someone's behaving that way, a response could be, "You must be really hurting right now." They'll be like, "What?" It totally diffuses it because you're recognizing that there's a person going through something beneath the behavior, right? That's what's
Yeah.
really happening, and that they're trying to make themselves feel in control of a life that they might feel completely out of control in. And they're doing that to try and exert anywhere that they can to try and get that sense of control back in their lives.
Well,
I
and
mean,
the same thought process where you stop your own internal spin down by like
yep,
by
absurd
envisioning
thought.
an absurd thought. If you
Yep,
throw an absurd or nice observation out in the middle
it's
of something, it
it's true.
completely it derails
It does, and it derails
entire
everything.
negative spin down.
And
Like, in the
yeah,
middle of somebody yelling at you, you're like, your eyes right now are so beautifully blue.
yeah, yeah.
There's
Oh, and they're
no
like,
way. There's no, it's like it's a shock to the system.
it's a
You know what I
shock to the
mean?
system,
And
right?
so like
Or you,
we
or
just need
you,
to be
or you,
better about like helping each other get out of
yeah.
our own negative head
And you
spiral.
give them a genuine compliment about whatever's, right in that moment. Like, you're a really incredible, powerful person. You're really passionate about what you're saying. What? Say what? Say, yeah, I get you're really powerful and
Yeah.
passionate.
Boy, we could be getting everybody back on the positivity train here
Woohoo!
shortly.
Let's do that.
Yeah. I have found that like, especially in the morning, like because negativity feeds more negativity, right? So
It
if you're in a
does.
bad
It
mood,
does.
you're taking everybody down the toxic spiral with you.
That's
So
right.
like right out of the gate before like somebody will call and right out of the gate before they even have the ability to say hello, like I will come up with some absurd question
Nice.
that has a positive, bend to it.
Nice.
What exciting things are we going to be doing today? Or,
I love that.
how are you planning to arrive at, the
That's beautiful,
wonderful
Tiffany.
circus that we are
Yeah.
getting to perform today?
What's the most amazing thing
And
that's
it makes
happened to
everybody
you?
laugh.
Right. What was the best
You
thing
just
about your
can't be mad
morning
at that.
today?
Yeah. And it also helps me trick my own internal psyche and like it stops that negative dialogue
Does. It
if
does.
I automatically start out a conversation in a positive light.
It does because you set the tone, you set the
Yeah.
resonance, the vibration at a higher vibrational frequency,
Yeah.
and then other people will match that as long
Yeah.
as you stay focused on that, as you say, hold on to that tone or vibration.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And that's amazing, isn't it? I love it. It's
Yeah.
magical to me.
It's fun.
Yeah,
So, what are some tools and resources that we might be able to utilize? You are going to be doing some workshops here
I am.
soon
I
that
am.
might enable some people, but do you have any book recommendations or anything people might be able to deploy to help with this? The one that I started this year was The Artist's Way.
Yes,
I
it's a
talked about
powerful
like
book.
art and whatnot, and I know that book's been around for a bazillion years, I think.
Yeah.
I
Doesn't it
had never read it, but it
doesn't
really
detract from the
made
value
me.
of it.
Oh yeah, it's a huge. The value in that one is huge, especially
Yeah,
if you are in any way artistic, and I don't just mean like drawing and painting or whatever, but in any way artistic. It really makes you get at past a lot of that negative
it
self-talk that's
does.
ingrained from early childhood
Does.
and challenges your thought processes.
And helps you to
I highly
identify that
recommend.
as, yeah, I
Yeah,
100% agree. I love
yeah,
that book.
yeah,
That was really powerful for me when I first discovered it and went through the process. And two things especially stood out to me about that book, by
yeah.
the way, The Artist's Way, which I think is just wonderful. One of them was called The Morning Pages,
Mm-hmm.
which is where you get up in the morning before you've had get your whole day going. You can have your cup of coffee or whatever, but before your whole routine begins,
Yep.
you sit down and write out like at least a page of free form, whatever's in your head, whatever thoughts are coming up, whatever it might be. Doesn't matter what it is. Oh, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? Oh, well, here, blah, 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 blah. Whatever comes up, you just write it down. And then every week you go back through and you read through
Mhm.
what you've written for the week, and you notice patterns, things that you're
Yep.
repeating, things that you're saying over and over, and helps you become conscious of your subconscious thoughts, right? The things that are
Yeah.
unconscious behaviors and thoughts in your head. Really powerful technique. And the other thing I really loved about that book as well, a lot of powerful things, but
Yeah.
something called the artist date.
Yes.
Right? Once a week,
Yes.
you take yourself out and nurture your inner artist. And you can be a computer scientist, you can be a, a nuclear physicist.
Yeah.
You're still artistic in whatever it is that you're doing. You don't have to be necessarily a traditional artist per se to apply these things to your life. And
Yeah.
to go take yourself out for your artist day where you do some of this just to nurture your own spirit, your own soul. You go to see an exhibit. You go to, watch a musical performance going on. You go and
Mhm.
read a chapter of your favorite book sitting outside on a park bench.
Yep.
Whatever it might be. You go take a soak in a hot tub for an hour. You take
Yep.
yourself on an artist date once a week to nurture your inner artist, your inner spirit,
Well,
your inner
and
voice.
another way to think of that is like, have a hobby, do something outside of, and
Something
that I know
outside
we
of
talked a lot about work-life
yeah,
harmony and balance and toxic people and all of those things in previous episodes. Like this is how you find and pay homage to what you need internally
it's
in
true.
that harmony equation by taking a minute out to do something you really love. Because
It's
so
so
much of
true.
life is like we have to go to work and you have to pay the bills and you have to take care of the kids and but like that harmony needs time,
Yeah,
space to
it
either
does.
do something creative or to do something that you truly love. And
You
that's, I
have to
think, a very important
you
part
have to
of
nurture
like,
that part of yourself and
yes,
take the time to do it. You're
absolutely.
exactly right. There's another great book that's been also been around a long time, which is really powerful by Richard Bach, and it's called Jonathan Livingston Seagull.
Mhm.
And it's awesome because it's very much a book about finding your own path,
Yep.
about following your own heart and your own intuition and breaking out from the mold and not letting
Yep.
other people's toxic behavior and toxic that talk become your own internal self-talk.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful metaphor and it's wonderfully done. And there's another book I think is really also powerful, a short read, but also very dense, called
Mhm.
the Seven Spiritual Laws of Success by
Okay.
Deepak Chopra, and really powerful as well. It's an easy read, but there's a lot going on between the words,
Sure.
when you read through it. And it talks about different ways that you can be successful in your life, your spiritual success, but it's also success in every area of your life.
Yeah.
And one of those is finding your dharma, your thing, the thing that why you're here on
Why?
the what are you here to contribute? Because each one of us is unique, Tiffany. We each have our own special abilities and strengths, and we're here to contribute in some way to society, to ourselves, and to the world, right? And it's by our own uniqueness, our own special gifts, that it's just what you do different than anybody else. And to find that and to honor that and to do that. I love working with people as well on this. So absolutely, you can contact me and reach out to me if you'd like to work some more with me on a personal level, on a one-on-one coaching and life coaching and transitions, especially. So yeah,
Absolutely.
glad to do that.
Especially if you're struggling to figure out one, where the toxic, voice is coming from, to work through some of the
Yeah,
challenges that is causing in your life, and then
yeah,
reframing some of that and learning the tools
absolutely.
necessary to kind of overcome some of that. It helps sometimes to have somebody to talk to and walk you through that, and also hold you accountable when
Absolutely.
you're backsliding into the toxic thought process.
Absolutely. And to be able to identify that and call you out on it without making you feel bad or less than, or making you somehow, being critical, but giving you honest feedback. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, there it is. That it's happening again. I didn't realize I was doing that until you started
Yeah.
talking to me about that.
Yep.
A lot of times it helps to have a person who's outside of your direct influence
Correct.
because you get a
There's no
different
baggage.
perspective. Right.
Yeah, and
And
they're not bringing
like I'm not
connected
invested into
baggage to
anything that's
you.
going on with
Yeah,
your in that stuff personally.
correct.
I'm
Yeah.
invested in your empowering you and making you a better person.
And that brings us to the end of yet another episode of Level Up Stronger. And
Woohoo!
today we've dove headfirst into challenging world of negative self-talk and unwelcome tenant in our mind.
Uh,
And we've explored the roots, the impact, and most importantly, the ways that we can start to change the narrative.
Yes, and remember, the journey to overcoming negative self-talk is a process. It's not just instant. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a process and it's a progress, and it's not about perfection. It's not about being perfect. It's about improving yourself on a daily basis. So be kind to yourself as you work through these changes. Give yourself a break. Recognize you're human. It's okay if you backpedal sometimes. We all do that. Just keep moving forward. Every step that you take towards positive self-talk is a step towards a stronger and more resilient you.
I want to thank you all for joining us today. If this episode resonated with you, or if you have your own experiences and strategies that you'd like to share, please reach out through our social media channels at levelupstronger.com.
Absolutely. And also don't forget to subscribe to Level Up Stronger for more of our insightful episodes. In addition to Level Up Stronger, you can also reach me, Ken Lyon, at lionroars.com, LYONROARS.com. And I'm also on Ken Lyon Roars on Instagram and on TikTok and on Facebook.
Awesome. Until then, keep challenging those negative thoughts, and remember, you have the power to change your inner dialogue. Here's to leveling up stronger, one thought at a time. I'm Tiffany Letterly.
I'm Ken Lyon, and thanks for listening.